today I'll be doing a tier list of what I think for the next format. So I'll go a bit fast, I'll try. Tier 1 is Kashtira. Kashtira is a very good deck this format. Very expensive, but for those who can afford it, it's a very good and solid deck. Branded, still a very solid deck. I would recommend it for players who still have the deck core, and it pairs very well with the Bestial package and the new cards that have been released. Sprite, still tier 1 even though they had their elf hit, because they can still put up like a cross and some negates, which is fine. So this is where it gets interesting. Tier limit is either tier 1 or tier 2. The reason because of this is they're really good with stuff like Kashtira, but they're not good on their own. So I'll just put them as a 1.5 for now. Runic is a tier 1.5 deck. It's not tier 1 because it's not that broken, but it's very good with something like a spellbook engine, and you just turbo out a Jaugen and a draw 4 on your opponent's turn with interruptions. Then there's Sword Soul, tier 1 deck. In my opinion, it's still a very good deck. None of its stuff were hit, it just was a deck that went under the radar. Then there's Darkward. Darkward is either tier 2 or Rogue. Still a very good deck, but and Bestials will come out of the format because they were mainly played because of tier element. Because they were hit, now they might go up to tier 2, but I'm still thinking that they're a rogue deck. Then there is Branded or Dogmatica. Dogmatica is a very good deck. It's mostly played just for fun, but I think it's rogue for now rather than anything. The only reason why this is because it's really good. It's a deck that basically rips your opponent's extra deck on turn 1, or half of it on turn 1, which is pretty good in my opinion. Then there's Stripe Brigade. This is a 1.5 deck. Main reason because of this is nothing. You can just play this with Lurlusk and it's a still very good deck. Cheap, does what it needs to do, and has Scarecrow cards as interaction. Then there's Salamangrate. Salamangrate is rogue, to be honest. They're a good deck, but they just don't pair too well just by themselves. They kinda are not worth the time and the effort, but they're not that bad, to be honest. Then there's Spriggans. Spriggans is a solid tier 1.5 deck contender. With the new support, it had a soul charge and more searchers, and it pushed the deck to a higher ceiling and is very good. Goatee, tier 2 right now, unfortunately. It's a still very good deck, but I don't think it's on the same level as these four. It's good, but and it's solid, to be honest, because right now I'm playing it, but it's not too busted, in my opinion. Draco Slayer. Draco Slayer is still an underrated deck, in my opinion. It's still a 1.5 deck. Reason people aren't playing this is just because of the Kashtira cards. But going first, if you're playing against Kashtira, they won't know if you're on Pendulum, and they might just ignore the pen scales. And even if so, it's like Jesse Cotton said in his latest video with some other YouTuber. Basically, they said that any deck that has the same problem as Pendulum doesn't mean that the other decks can out it. Meaning that if Spriggans has the same problems as Pendulums when it comes to Kashtira, like say they have to deal with a macro cosmog, zone locks, etc. It doesn't mean that Draco Slayers are less powerful than Spriggans just because of that fact. Yeah, they can be a bit downsided because they might lock the skills, but other than that, they're still a solid deck. And if you still have them when Darkwing Blast was around, I would probably still give them a shot or two. Virtual World is just not worth the time, the effort. There are better synchro decks like Punk, and you should just play that instead. Ninja, their rogue deck, maybe a tier 2 deck, but I don't think they're as good as Goatee, but they're a very good budget deck and a very good deck that needs to do what it needs to do. Then there's Drytron. Drytron isn't bad, but people still need to test what it's gonna be. There's still Kashtira in the format, which has a walking macrocosmos, so this might not be as good, but I'll just say it's a rogue deck just for now. Gishki, I think is a tier 2 or tier 1.5 deck. I'm just put it at tier 2. Gishki puts out a big monster that um, uh, impaired with Sprite is a very good deck, but on its own is just not a good deck. But almost all the variants play this with Sprite, and with Sprite this is a very good deck. Then there's Shadow. Shadow is just rogue or not worth the time and effort. It can put out a Winda and Schism, which is still good, I guess. But going second, the deck has a lot of problems, and going first, if it doesn't draw what it needs to draw, it just breaks. And then there's Gold Pride. I'll call Gold Pride Rogue just because, impaired with something like the Punk engine, they can do some neat things, but on their own, they're not that good, but they're a pretty fun deck. I'll give them that. Pearly is a tier 2 deck. It's a very fun deck. It's not the most competitive of decks, but it is a really cool deck, in my opinion. Meccano, it's rogue. Might be tier 2 actually, but it needs to still be experimented with the pure variant. With just the ritual card, it's pretty good, but with the pure variant, it's okay, I guess. It puts up some interruptions. Then there is the Flandries deck. Flandries deck, in my opinion, is 1.5. This deck, even though they hit Barrier Statue, is still a very good deck. They have the counter trap, which is basically a searchable floodgate, and it is still a very good deck nonetheless. If you find a cheap Flandries core up for grabs, I would take it, as I think it's still a very good deck. Notoria, unfortunately, with the hits on Ishizu, I would call this a not too good of a deck. It's still very good. You can still turbo out um, uh, what's Beast. You can still turbo out Notoria Beast, but right now it's just Rogue. It was tier 2 for a few weeks, I guess, or tier 1.5, but now it just completely lost a lot with the tier hit. Then there is Generator. Generator, I think, is a rogue deck just because it doesn't do enough, in my opinion, in the sense that it requires some setup, not a lot, but requires some setup. It can do some things, but it's a bit slow when compared to these decks. Might be on the same level as Goatee, but they're a bit less interruptive when it comes to playing on the opponent's turn. Next is Matmech. I think Matmech are still a very good either tier 1.5 or tier 2. I will put that tier 2 for now, but I wouldn't argue a lot with someone that would think that they are 1.5. They're good. They didn't lose anything on the ban list, and with Bestials slowly leaving the format, they'll enter again, but they're not they don't put up too much interruption. Then there's Dragon Link. Dragon Link is either rogue deck or tier 2. They're still a very good deck, didn't lose anything on the ban list, and still a solid pickup. If you have a Dragon Core line around, you should try it. Maybe you'll cook up something spicy. Then there's Eldritch. Eldritch is probably a rogue deck. It's the least played trap deck right now, I think, as there is Labyrinth running around, and Labyrinth is a 1.5 deck in my opinion. You can play this as an engine deck, or you can just play it purely, and purely it performs really well. It's annoying and it's better alter guys basically, especially with the new support. Then finally, this is Trap Tricks. Trap Tricks, this is post structure deck, and I'll call it tier 1.5, not tier 1, but not tier 2, but just right in the middle, just because it plays heavily on the opponent's turn. When you see the choke point of an opponent of the opponent's deck, you have to understand their deck and you'll hit the choke point, and when you do, it'll be highly in your favor at that point. They're not a deck that OTK, but they're a deck that control. So I really like them. I've been testing them for with them for the last couple of days, and yeah, I might just end up playing this deck in the Road to Champion series that I'm doing right now. So yeah, guys, thanks for watching. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe and like. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.